This meeting is called to order. Oh, and also, just a reminder, whenever it is that you're addressing the task force, turn your mic on. It works well for the IT guy. That way our voices are heard and picked up on the audio recording. All right, Mr. Hughes.
Mariam Rahim, Mariam. Sarah Balgoyan. Lynn Branham. Kim Bryan. Pam Burnside. Brenda Butts. Sam Bindum.
Here.
Alex Evans. Walter Feinberg. Amy Felty.
Here.
David Harbour. Here. Ryan Hughes, present. Artist James. Here. Esther Pat. Here. Carolyn Randolph. Here. Henry Ross. Kevin Snyder. Here. Susan Silver. Here. Demario Turner.
Here.
Jerry Walter. Here. Rosita Bird. Here. Ellen D. Here. And did Pam walk in? Pam Burnside? No, sorry. Thank you.
All right, our next item, is the approval of the agenda. Yes.
Yes. Is the task force creation, is that referring to my presentation on Community Justice Task Force?
Yes.
Okay, so it's probably Community Justice Task Force.
Okay.
But that led to or was part of what led to this creation of this body. But I was going to give an overview of the recommendations. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so I'd probably be, Community Justice Task Force.
Okay. You make that note. Community Justice Task Force.
You need a move to approve.
Yes.
So moved.
All right. All in favor of approving the agenda with the modification of the Community Justice Task Force?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, motion carries. The agenda is approved. Looking to approve the minutes of March 24th.
Would move to approve.
Second.
All in favor of approval of the minutes for March 24th? Say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries to approve the minutes of March 24th. All right, our next item on the agenda is public participation. Our first participant this evening is PNC Petrie.
Good evening, everyone. For the record, I'm PNC Petrie. And the reason for wanting to come before you all is the article that I wrote and was published in the News Gazette about the 12 hours that 3 county board members spent at the jail. Some of what was in that article was challenged at your last meeting. Specifically, that there are no jaywalkers in the jail. And it was suggested that maybe the wording should have been that there were no jaywalkers those 12 hours. So as an academic and somebody who's a researcher, I take that seriously. And so the next day I contacted the sheriff and asked for all of the data for that weekend, which was Halloween weekend. And then from the 1st of November to the 15th of March, which is roughly 135 days, I asked for 25% random sample. I got just under 20% random sample because that's a lot of data. And now I have the raw data for all those days. And I've looked at all the raw data. I haven't run the crosstabs. But the raw data contains the names, addresses, why they are in jail, which are virtually for every one of them for 3, 4, and 5, 6 charges, race, age, booking date, and when they get out. So there's a lot of information there. And I see nothing on jaywalking. I see nothing on being in jail for bonds. I see a lot on those Excel sheets of why people are in jail and reasons that I don't think many of us would want them walking around our community. Now, the data doesn't tell us how it was handled when they went to court or how things were resolved on that end. All I see is the booking data, and that's all I got asked for. So the thing that I learned from doing this is most of the people in jail, as we really know, are from the metropolitan areas. There are very few from the county. And there are people from throughout the state that are in our jails. There are people from outside our state that are in the jail. And I'm not one to judge the seriousness because I did not go and collect the data on how you rank the seriousness of the charges. But they appear to me to be things that one would consider that one would not want these people to be outside the jail at that point in time. So one of the things that doing this I learned is that we hear a lot about the data and hear a lot about who's in the jail. And what has concerned me all the time that I'm hearing these reports, whether I sit here or I sit up there, is that there's very little deep analysis of the charges of the people who are in the jail. It's always very surface numbers and counts, but not why are these people seriously in jail? And do we have any people in jail who, if the laws were changed, such as drug possession, how many then would not be there? And there are very few people in the data that I've looked at, remember it's random, selected dates, that are there for small amounts of drug possession. There are people there who are there for very large amounts of drug possession, but not small amounts. So I think the questions that we have to start asking ourselves as we look at all of these things is, if the laws were changed, how many of those people would no longer be in jail? Would it make a significant difference? And when we talk about the statistics of the people in jail, I do encourage, as you go forward, that you dig deep into the reasons that they have been booked in jail and do some cross-tabbing and analysis of why they're there. Thank you very much. Oh, yes, I'd be happy to share those Excel files with anybody here who'd like to run data and cross-tabs and look at them yourselves.
You're looking at people who are in jail,
I'm looking at the booking data.
not arrests.
Well, that's booking data.
So, I mean, what I'm saying is that they could have been ticketed or cited?
No, these people.
No, that's what I'm asking. Yeah,
No,
so-
no, there's dates of booking and dates of release on the data.
So there was no one stopped for jaywalking during that time and giving him the citation?
Not that was booked.
Okay, got it, thanks.
Got it? Okay.
Between November and March, there were so many people who were arrested for possession of drugs and for shoplifting, which gets prosecuted as felony burglary, that I'm wondering if you actually got a random sampling. Again, can you tell us, the data you have is what % of the people who were in the jail for that period of time? You said you got a random sampling. How many, was it 10%? Was it 20%?
No, the way I posited it to the sheriff was that there were 135 days. I picked a range of
Right.
time from the 1st of November, since they gave me Halloween,
Right,
which
I'm just
was-
asking the percent, Patsy. What % of the total jail population was in that? Were you able to figure that out?
Every piece of data I have is a complete record for that day.
So you have a complete record of every person who was in jail during that time period?
On those days, on the random sample, yes.
Okay, so the days were sampled randomly and not the,
No, correct.
correct, okay. And it was
It's
about,
full record. Some of them, bookings, lines are 300 and some, because people have many lines on their bookings. Some people
okay, I
have.
guess I'm so, I just want to be clear that you weren't looking at every person who was in jail during that period of time. Is that right? Or you were?
No, I said that I had a random sample of days out of the 135 days. But for those randomly picked days, I have the complete records.
Okay, and that's the complete record of every person who was there that day or every person who was booked that day?
Everybody that was there that day
Okay,
and
got it.
booked, yes.
Okay. Well,
Okay.
so there's two different things, because there are people, someone who was booked 3 days earlier would still be there that day. So was it everyone who was
I would
present,
s-
the population, everyone who was spent the night there was on the list, is that right?
That is accurate.
Okay. And you saw no one in jail for any offense that you would not be terrified to have them out walking around?
I'm happy to share it with anybody here, and they can look at it.
I would like to have a look at it. I mean, I'm sure
Yeah.
that that's not true for the whole population, but I am curious to see how that played out in the days you were looking at. Thank
Yeah,
you.
absolutely. I'll be glad to share it.
Thanks.
I encourage people to take it and do a lot of analysis and do a lot of cross-tabbing. And I do encourage people to make some assumptions. Like, I made some assumptions that if marijuana was legalized up to a certain amount, how many people would not be there? And that was not very many. Now, if we legalized a few other things that are being talked about around the country or even in the state, and you took them out, what is that percentage? And I think that's very important to be looking at, because it's not something we can do in the county, but it's certainly something that could be written about and leveraged with our legislators in Springfield, and those are all very important aspects.
One last question. Did you say it did or did not include the ultimate disposition of the case?
No, I do not have that data. So
Okay.
on the data, the last two columns are the date of booking and the date of release, if there has been a date of release on that particular set of times. In other words, if I'm looking at one on the 1st of November and somebody's booked, and I have one to the 12th of March, that person may be in jail still, or they may have been released.
But if they were, like, say, booked for aggravated battery on November 1st and then released the next day because no charges were brought against them in arraignment, that you wouldn't have in the
Yeah,
report
I
you
would have it, because it would say that they were released.
the next day.
Yeah,
Got it. Okay, thank you.
got it?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, I had one question.
Yes.
You mentioned sort of a lack of jaywalking. I think jaywalking is sort of a code for just general, relatively small infractions. So did you parse out, for instance, how many of them were for ordinance violations?
Well, they're all defined, and so they would be ordinance violations. It's suspended license, leaving an accident, no car insurance, battery, illegal gun possession, lots of battery, a huge amount of battery. I could just go on, yeah. Anything else?
No, that's all.
Okay.
Thank you.
So sorry, thank you for getting the data. I think data is super important, and I know enough about the criminal justice system, but not fully extend. So I just want to be clear that I'm understanding that these are arrests not proven guilty yet, right? Because some people.
That's what I wanted to make very
Okay,
clear
yeah.
to people,
Right.
that I only asked for who was in.
Arrests, yeah.
In the jail, and it shows when they're booked
Right.
and when they're released.
Yeah.
I don't have any determinant as
Right.
to guilty or not guilty, or if
Adjudication, yeah.
charges were dropped and they only focused on certain
Right.
charges, okay?
Yeah, and then these arrests that are there would be determined by the police officers at the time, the charging police officers in many cases, of whether they're at jail, waiting for their hearing, or, right, because we're
Right,
waiting on that, right, okay.
Right, and the point I was making, that the county is responsible for the house,
Yeah,
but the county puts very few people in the house.
and I'd love to see the data, but I wonder about privacy with names and addresses.
I can double check with the sheriff on that. Actually, I was very surprised that when I got the data, that it does have the names, because when we were in the jail and I asked about getting data, I thought I would just get the numbers attached to the people's files. So I will make certain that I ask that question of the sheriff, if anybody wants me to share it with them, because I can just take that column out.
Yeah, I think, because all of our stuff that's shared has to be public.
Yeah, it does.
Awareness,
That's
so I
right.
think that would be best to keep the.
I'll be happy to do that also, to facilitate others being able to have a chance to dig deeper into the many levels of bookings for one individual, which I wasn't aware that there could be so many myself. So it was an education for me.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Our next public participant is Martell Millen. Go ahead and turn your mic on.
Okay, Martell Malev-Urbana. When we're looking at the jaywalking, I'm just going to mention like this: you're not going to find them locked up for the jaywalking. You're going to find them locked up for either missing court or not paying the fine. So you have to look at the city court, what happened during the city court. So that's something you're going to find. But I come up here to talk about, with the Racial Justice Task Force, some things I would love for y'all to look into. And it's about the driving around here. How do people lose license? Because you can go in a room with 10 African-American men, ranges from ages from my age, 55, to 18, and you only find out of 10, maybe 3 of them got license. It's how are they losing their license? You know, my son's friends, 19 years old, I'm talking to 3 or 4 of them. They didn't already lost their license. They don't get their license to 16. And that's some data we really need to look at, is the driving data in this county. And when we're looking at some of the charges going on, you can get stopped for driving without license and end up with 3 or 4 different charges, other than resisting arrest, just so much comfort from driving. And that's all I really need to say. We really need to look at the driving. And just in the last week or so, I was at a guy's funeral that got stopped for driving, that died in the county jail, was being held on a $300 fine. I talked to his mom. They had no reason to stop him. They just decided to run him when he was driving. And now he's dead. And them are the kind of things that just really just bothers me, you know. It shouldn't have never happened to him, and he should have really been released. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I had a quick question. So you did mention that obviously driving license is it's pretty clear is a problem. Do you see any common reasons for why a driver's license is pulled, or?
You have multiple things. You may not have insurance. You may get a ticket for a tail light. You may get multiple tickets, you know. And really some of the tickets at the officer discretion. He don't have to give you a ticket because you got a tail light out. He don't have to give you a ticket because you got a license plate out. And you may have a license plate out and a tail light out. That's two different tickets. You know, it's just a way, improper lane. You may get improper lane, use improper lane, tail light, and maybe excessive speed without a radar. You know, I know a guy got a speeding ticket and they never showed him how fast he was going. Just told him he was speeding. Just the driving in this county, we really need to look at, because just too many people of African American that lost their license so quick. I mean, we need to look at the ones that come out of high school, how long it take before their license are suspended in Champaign County.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you. We're moving to our next agenda item, which is task force member updates.
Hey, guys. We have some updates on the community gatherings and some of the direction that we got suggestions from last time, and Artis and Pam and I met and tried to brainstorm some places and organizations, and I think we've got a pretty good alliance of a couple of groups in Champaign, NAACP and NCAM and First Followers, joining together to help host an event, and still working with them on a location. There's been some really good suggestions of different churches, and we've talked to a few. Artists talked with the pastor at Salem, and Patricia Avery of NAACP recommended potentially at Bethel if First Followers is going to be involved, because that's where they typically meet anyhow, and that might be a possibility, and we'll have to check in with that to see if that's an option. Reached out to the community center in Rantoul, and they're happy to help host. They are looking at dates in May. I just suggested, tell us when might be a good time in evening or weekend in May. We think that it might be good to really try to have several times and locations available. So thinking about a Champaign, a Rantoul, an Urbana, and having them all kind of set so we could promote them all at once and people could pick and choose, but definitely having one on a weekend and an evening night for sure. So we don't have any kind of leads on Urbana, and are looking for some suggestions and from you guys and anybody that wants to help with that, and if there's any other organizations that want to help partner and sponsor. I've asked the community center in Rantoul if they, if there's a group there that might want to, and I haven't heard back quite yet. So that's kind of my update. Did I miss anything, Artis? Thank you. We talked about a lot of things, but I think that's kind of the things that have come to fruition right now. We did wonder, I wasn't here, but Kevin, you suggested maybe the Bar Association being interested in helping and support in some way, and we thought a financial contribution would be a great way for them to help, a couple $100 to provide refreshments and paper and materials needed at the events, and they could be listed as a sponsor in that way.
What I would say, first of all, I plan to contact, my law office is actually moving into an office share with John Gadow, who's the president of the Bar Association. So that shouldn't be an issue. He was having some time difficulties over the last couple weeks, so I haven't been able to really sit down and speak to him about it, but I will.
Okay.
He is also, I believe, a member of Canaan Baptist Church in Urbana, which I think would be an appropriate Urbana venue / church.
Okay, great. Well, if you can let me know what you hear from him when you pin him down, that'd be great. And then I think we have to think about where the money would go to. I know we're not an organization that could accept it, but maybe one of the sponsoring organizations could, it could just go to one of them and they could take care of that.
I don't know what the legality of it
Yep.
is. Since I'm a member of the Champaign County Bar Association, maybe I could be a facilitator. I don't know whether the law would allow me, since I'm also a member of the task force, but.
A facilitator at an event?
If I took the check and purchased stuff for the
Oh,
event or
yeah.
something like that, I don't know what the, I'll
Might
have
be
to
better
look
to
into
go
the
to a
legality.
nonprofit and
Yeah.
go in that way for the bar association and for, but I don't know that either, so
Yeah.
legal stuff, would be, check that out. Mm-hmm.
One was responsible with a donation. I know INCAM is a 501c, and you can make a donation to them, and we'll make sure that we'll purchase these.
Who specifically is the 501c3?
National Council of African American Men.
Okay.
Yeah, and to that point, just thinking, we really would love to get these kind of scheduled and going before summer, and it'd be great if we could have 2 or 3 in May, and I think you guys discussed last time, kind of, people could attend whichever, and we'd, help host, facilitate whatever was needed, depending on the sponsor organizations and the large crowds that will surely come out.
I contacted actually, I'm a member of the local chapter of the American Civil Liberties Union, and if you just let the sponsors know, that they're willing to contribute financially and be a co-sponsor. Either, I know, it doesn't seem logistically hard, either we could write the check to, to the, one of the sponsoring groups, or, to pay for the room rental, or, give us a list of refreshments, we'll go buy them and write the check for that, but the organization can contribute. They want to know how many of these would be and how much they should commit.
Yeah.
And like we say, well, $50 an event, they said, I don't know how many events they're gonna be,
Yeah.
but so, sort of left it at, let us know what is needed, and the organization can contribute some.
Thank you,
Thank
that's
you.
wonderful news.
Okay, and the Independent Media Center is willing to host.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Well, at the time I discussed, they just made a commitment for it. We didn't have any times yet, so as we go along,
Yeah,
if we decide a date, you can let me know, and we can check our calendar.
wonderful.
Okay.
Yeah, and artists, it just occurred to me too, like second weekend in May, is that graduation? Do we want to stay away from that weekend? Just, so that, well, maybe earlier in the week, if somebody wanted to be a Monday, Tuesday, evening event, but then probably, yeah, we should stay away from that whole kind of. So that does push us back quite a bit. I also don't think there's any reason we can't hold 3 in a 2-week period if they're in different locations, and we're all committed to doing that too the last 2 weeks, but then we run into Memorial Day, and there's always gonna be something. So I think with the locations, like, their availability is, top priority. So if IMC could give us an idea of some nights, weekends that might work better for them, that could help us plan around, and same with Rantoul, and we'll check in Salem and maybe Bethel, if that's an option, and we'll just kind of keep working at the logistics and then go from there. Is anybody fabulous at art design and wants to create the flyer, poster? Volunteers? Anybody? Bueller?
Ryan's the only one here with a computer right now.
Yep. I already volunteered him to be stand-in secretary last time I was here, and I'm sure, I don't know if I can ask him to do that again. Well, if anyone it'd be great to have a nice flyer by somebody who knows how to do that well.
Any other member updates? Okay. Our next agenda item, oh, go ahead.
Ryan, do you want to talk at this point about the idea you floated past me recently? Or do you want me to?
It is up to you.
The comments, okay.
All right. Okay.
Sam,
Yes.
I have something to say too, and I don't know when to say it. I'm not used to talking to the group, so.
Oh.
Do I, later?
Well, we have task force member comments.
Oh,
So
all right.
if there's anything pertaining to some of the items that we discussed during our last meeting in terms of looking for community sponsors or potential presenters, this would be the time to kind of provide those updates. If it's something that you read or maybe something that you saw in the community, something that you want to bring our attention to, that might be better suited for the task force member comments towards the end.
Well, at the last meeting, you tell me if I should talk about it now. At the last meeting, people were talking about their ideas. They were talking about getting, finding people who would be willing to give a verbal testament of what had happened to them and how things are affecting their lives. I registered with UPTV. I'm a community producer now, and they'll teach you how, they'll loan you the equipment, teach you how to use it, help you with editing or whatever you need to do, and put it on their TV station, and you get a copy of it so you can take it to meetings and groups. And my idea, I wanted to see what the group thought of this. My idea would be to use some of your ideas in getting people to speak about what had happened to them. They wouldn't have to be, they could be anonymous on screen too if they wanted to be, or they could give their name. I wouldn't want them to give other people's names or the companies that may have done them wrong, but I thought if they would speak, and then we could move it, work it into a whole program. Maybe they would say something, then we could cut away to some statistics or something and do that kind of thing. So that's my idea. It won't cost us anything. They do this for people who live in Urbana and people like us. So I wonder what you guys thought.
Yes.
Just a quick question. Are you talking about producing, are you talking about getting this testimony for this program from the forums that were, or public forums that we're having? Like taping it and then doing that edit? Or are you talking about lining people up separately to help you make a program?
Oh, no, well, that maybe, but the people who tape the people saying things. I'm not saying this very well, but.
You want to tape the whole event? You want to make sure that that we have our NAACP holds a meeting at Bethel AME, that whole thing be taped, and then you can edit it into a program? Is that what you were talking about?
Well, what I thought, it was just having people, I thought that people were talking about getting some people who would be willing to speak up and say, this has happened to me. And then if we got some of those and taped them, then we can go over to the facilities or anywhere we went. But we had this short little clip of someone talking, or more than one person talking about things that had happened to them. And they could be anonymous if they wanted. But I thought if it was put in a video, if it could be shown on TV and maybe to certain groups, and they would hear and see the people talking, I thought it might reach them. Any comments?
I think that would be fabulous for the forums, and we, just need to have some opt-out, opt-in kind of waiver type things and options, so that, people are agreeing to be on tape, but I think that would really help us move beyond the forums.
Yeah, I like the idea a lot, and I think those personal statements would be much more powerful. Again, going back to what I said last time, when we finish up, what are we going to produce? I think those statements will be a lasting testament, and that would be helpful to us. I think there'd have to be a time frame set, and if we're going out to the community and setting up these events, we might want to solicit people and say, is there anybody here that would be willing to make a statement and have it taped?
Yeah.
So knowing that in advance would be helpful, so that we could line people up. And I don't think it would be selecting people to be necessarily representative, but just simply asking for volunteers.
I also like the idea as well, especially the anonymous piece, because for some folks, they just don't want to come forward in a public arena and speak. And I think if you could make it a situation where they're anonymous, that they'll be more likely to tell their stories. So I appreciate that idea.
Good, thank you.
Anyone else? Yeah,
Was this the time to present it?
perfect timing.
No, okay, I take it back.
And I have two other quick updates, just one that we heard from CU Citizens for Peace and Justice, who will, and want to present, and I think is working with Sam to get on the schedule at one of our upcoming meetings, and Tracy Parsons from the Community Coalition, and I think will also, hopefully in the next couple weeks, be presenting on their new initiative around gun violence, so we can hear what's going on.
And also, we have someone from Court Watch that was interested in providing some information as well during the presentation. Yeah. All right. Any other updates? Okay, we're going to move to presentations at this point on our agenda. And first up is the Community Justice Task Force.
Here's what I'm going to do tonight. I'm going to give you an overview of the work of the Community Justice Task Force and a quick update on what's been done in response to the recommendations, and sometimes what's not been done in response to the recommendations. And then there will be some times where I will be asking a fellow task force member to share information when we get, or do you want to do reentry in the next place? It might make sense to do it during this presentation. So James Kilgore, who I also had the privilege to serve with, will be sharing some insights as well. The task force was appointed in 2012, and we tendered our recommendations in 2013. We were appointed by the county board, and our charge was to develop recommendations to reduce incarceration, reduce recidivism, and facilitate the rehabilitation of people from our county who are incarcerated. The task force was comprised of 3 county board members. 2 of them have gone on now. One's a state representative and one's a state senator. So I just wanted to let you know that serving on this task force, probably one of you is going to become maybe governor. Yeah. So we had 3 county board members, a prosecutor, someone from the Regional Planning Commission. We had experts in what's called behavioral health. And behavioral health is the term now used. It encompasses both mental illness, addressing the needs of those with mental illnesses, as well as those with substance abuse disorders. We had another professor from the University of Illinois who teaches at a prison in Danville, and then 2 people who have been steeped in criminal justice reform. One is James, who wears many hats, and then my background is law and policy. We developed 10 recommendations, and the first was that we advised the county to integrate restorative justice throughout the entire criminal justice system. So not so it's at the periphery of the criminal justice system, so that it is integrated throughout. This, for those of you who may not have heard this term, restorative justice, it is a very different justice paradigm from the traditional, conventional approach to criminal justice, which really has a retributive, or what's called a, it's a punitive orientation. So instead of focusing on doing things to people for the most part, we're going to send you to jail, we're going to put you on probation. There may be incarceration, of course, but the focus is still on working with people. With people, for example, so that those who have committed crimes understand the harm that they have caused, so that there is an opportunity for them to have a dialogue with the person that has been victimized, and an opportunity to provide redress for the harm that has been caused. So it's an approach to criminal justice where there is true accountability. Victims have a meaningful voice in the system, an opportunity for healing. I have to tell you, I in some ways can't say enough about the promise and potential of restorative justice. But one of the mechanisms for implementing it, if you look at our report, you'll see references to victim offender mediation. That's really a bit of an archaic term. Restorative justice conferences, there is the victim, there is the person who committed the crime. There are also family members of the victim, family members of the person who committed the crime, because they're also often very traumatized by what has happened, by the criminal wrongdoing. And then there is a neutral facilitator. And they meet together, and during that dialogue, it is impressed upon the person what really happened. So the person who burglarized my home last year, if I meet with them instead of saying, it's not a big deal, actually to understand how that was truly harmful. And there are other restorative processes. To give you one other example, family group decision-making can be used at the reentry level when people are coming out of jail or prison. It can be used with probation. And so instead of a probation official, for example, just developing a plan, what happens is the family is empowered to play a key role. In fact, if it's done in many jurisdictions, they create the plan that is going to help this person turn his or her life around. It is very effective because who knows these people better than family? It's very empowering for families. It's part of restorative practices. So in any event, that's our recommendation. Now, the bad news is, as far as the adult criminal justice system, we don't have restorative justice. There's been no affirmative steps taken with the adult criminal justice system. I credit our state's attorney for bringing it into the juvenile system. We need to bring it into the adult system. That's what the task force said. Now, I think the other bit of good news, though, is that last year the county applied for a grant from the MacArthur Foundation. It was a very competitive grant process, the most competitive I have seen. And the county gave a yeoman's effort. The jurisdiction from Illinois that got it was Cook County. But in any event, in that application, the state's attorney made a commitment, if we got that planning grant, to play the leadership role in bringing restorative justice into our criminal justice system. So in that packet of materials you've been given, there is that letter from her. The task force's second recommendation was to adopt a comprehensive pretrial services program. Now, pretrial services has two main purposes. The first is a screening function. So what happens if somebody has been booked into the jail, there is a pretrial services officer who applies what's called a risk assessment instrument. It's been validated to make sure it's looking for the right things. And they are assessing these individuals for their risk of not appearing for a court proceeding or the risk to the public safety if they were to be released while their case is being processed through the criminal justice system. This risk assessment is done, the information is provided to the judge. So the judge makes release decisions, but they are informed by instruments that have been, the science is so strong on risk assessment. It works. It does a much better job of ensuring that people will show up for court proceedings. It does a much better job of protecting the public safety than just making decisions based on, it looks like let's give them $5,000 bond, which is not, that's based on gut feeling. It doesn't work well. So our recommendation was to adopt a pretrial services program. And what happens once that assessment is made, if somebody is low risk, that person would be released. They shouldn't, in fact, the assessment should be occurring at the jail. And we now have the tools. We aren't using them here, but the tools, so if they're low risk, they shouldn't even be booked into the jail. And I know the data is going to be covered in the next presentation, but just to mention, because we heard some other statistics, the report of the consultant who examined our jail said the majority of the people in the jail, and they looked two different kinds of data analysis, are low risk, misdemeanors and ordinances. So if they're low risk, they shouldn't even be in there, but if they get before the judge, they're out. Moderate risk, released with conditions, the conditions that the least restrictive conditions needed to provide that reasonable assurance that the public safety will be protected and that they'll show up for court proceedings. If high risk, they're detained in jail while the case is being tried. The other function of pretrial services is supervision. So if a moderate risk person is released in the community and maybe has to meet with the pretrial services officer once a week, it depends what that risk assessment instrument says. And this is the other reason why, or another reason why, pretrial services is important. The studies have shown if somebody is released and subject to conditions that aren't needed, too many conditions, that promotes recidivism. So it's very important that there be this scientific process that helps the judge's decisions. Now, here's the really bad news. There's going to be some good news, by the way, but this is, I think, the really bad news because, well, it's good and bad. Here's the good news. After the task force tendered its report, the county did, and I don't know the details other than that there was some money budgeted for pretrial services. Our report came out in August or in the summer of 2013. In November of 2013, I open up the paper and I see a headline in the News Gazette that says, "Pretrial Services Program is a dud." It was on the front page. There had been a memo sent by one judge and 3 court officials who report to that judge that said that memo told the county board that they had conducted a 5-week pilot program of pretrial services, and they said it wouldn't work in our county. It would only have gotten 1 person out of the jail. Of course, because I've looked at all the research nationwide, sensed that something was amiss, so I sent this to the Pretrial Justice Institute, which is the premier group on pretrial justice. There's just no other group that knows as much about pretrial justice as this. What happened, the director of PJI sent a letter. I submitted it to the county board, and in that letter, the president said that pretrial services had not been tried here, that it simply was not pretrial services that had been applied. I'll give you an example. Actually, this would get into the details that I don't think I'll belabor now, but the letter can be provided to you, of course. In addition to that letter, I received an email from PJI that said this, explaining the letter they were sending to the county board. "We didn't point out that a 5-week analysis of data was too short a time to learn anything. We did not address that because it would not have mattered if they had looked at 5 years' worth of data. What they were looking at was the wrong thing, so they were going to come up with the wrong conclusions regardless of how long they looked." So what was disappointing, devastating, honestly, is that this news did not make the front page of the newspaper. Yes, Kevin? I'm sorry, what judge was that? All right, and I'll let you make this judgment. We're going to work with all these people to effect reform, and I'm happy to, so if you think, and I can, because actually it's in the newspaper, so it was Judge Defanis. But I do want to underscore that that all of these people, if we want to make a difference in our criminal justice system. So that is the fact. And I do want to also underscore that I just think there needs to be a lot of training and education, including of the court officials, of pretrial services, why it's needed and the research behind it. So so here's this letter from the experts. Here's this research all over the country about the value of these risk assessment instruments, and there's research about even 2 to 3 days in jail increases recidivism. And that so-called pilot project stopped everything. And that's not good news for Champaign County. The third recommendation, now let's go to something good, where there's been movement. The third recommendation was to develop a comprehensive behavioral health system of care. The current approach, or certainly when we were doing our work, very fragmented system in terms of addressing the people in the criminal justice system, and there are so many of them with mental health problems and substance abuse disorders. Very fragmented, very large gaps in services. Such we didn't have any detox whatsoever at the time. So we were calling for a comprehensive approach to behavioral health in the criminal justice system. For example, we called for, as a priority, a community-based behavioral health crisis center. And that would be a place where if the law enforcement officials, who would be trained, by the way, on crisis intervention, if they discern that somebody was grappling, maybe it's a disorderly conduct, but really it's a mental health issue, instead of taking the person to the jail, they would have this alternative. As far as this recommendation, there has been movement forward, and it's pulling different segments of the community. So we have the mental health board. The sheriff has provided an enormous amount of laudable leadership. We have service providers all coming together. And the good news is that the county did get a grant from the Department of Justice to facilitate planning. And I talked to the deputy sheriff this morning, Alan Jones, to get an update. And the purpose is to try to keep as many of these people as possible from even getting into the jail. And if they are in the jail, to limit their stay, and then also to give them comprehensive services. So I think that's good news. We aren't there yet by any means, but there certainly seems to be strong commitment from everybody, and including county board members that I've heard, and Patsy Petrie is certainly one. Recommendation 4, we called for a full range of sentencing options for judges, and diversion options as well. Diversion options are great because people can avoid criminal convictions, and if you have a conviction, so many doors end up being closed, like employment doors and complications with public housing and the like. Really hasn't been anything overly significant of which I'm aware to report on that recommendation. The 5th recommendation was to establish a reentry program, and James, would you be able to provide information?
Yeah, can I do that at the end, and I'll just do that with my other.
Absolutely. Okay, so we'll be hearing from James in a bit to talk about reentry, but yeah, I've got to go ahead and say my hat's off to James because he's provided an enormous amount of leadership, both on our task force and then since we tendered our recommendations. So the 6th recommendation it's so important. It was basically, it's so important, but so often it's not done. And that was that there be adequate funding to make sure, for example, that there are the community-based sentencing options. So judges aren't basically like, well, I can either slap a fine, put them on probation, or incarcerate the person. We want other options, and we did spell out some. But those options need to be adequately funded. The 7th recommendation was for the establishment of what is called a Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. Now, it's honestly, it's really hard for me to, I don't think I could overestimate the importance of this recommendation. This is key, in my opinion, because without a group like this, the decisions, we've got people working in their little, there's some collaboration, but it can be sporadic. And what is needed for a well-functioning criminal justice system is system-wide planning. So across the country, these are becoming quite commonplace. We're behind in not having a criminal justice coordinating council. But what happens is there will be diverse membership. People often called the key stakeholders. So you'd have a judge, of course, and a prosecutor, and a defense attorney, and somebody from probation. And but you'd also have, for example, somebody with expertise in substance abuse problems. You would have representatives from the community and other individuals to make sure that there are diverse perspectives. So also that there is buy-in, both from different sectors of the criminal justice system, but so that there is that needed public report. Now, when we put together the grant application last year, we made a strong effort to try to get support for the coordinating council, and we couldn't get there are several people right now who are wary of that. But in this county, we are making progress in pulling diverse people together to do some criminal justice planning. James, I'm sure we'll talk about, there's something called a reentry council. That's an example. For this grant we just got involving the behavioral health system, there's at least some diversity in that planning group. So I think part of it is getting to a point of people feeling comfortable with this new paradigm, that you're pulling in people and actually working together and actually seeing how effective that can be. Again, there's just, the National Association of Counties, for example, is very much behind coordinating councils. The 8th recommendation has been implemented, and that's the establishment of the Racial Justice Task Force. Of course, the goal of the recommendation is not to just have a task force, but to make meaningful steps forward in addressing the racial disparity issue, which I'm confident we will do. The 9th recommendation dealt with, again, it's infrastructure, evaluation, getting data collection, evaluation processes in place, but really getting somebody who's permanently in place to make sure that that evaluation is occurring, and it's occurring across the board. I've noticed a tendency when you bring forward a new program, they say, well, what's the data like on that? And there's not that searching examination of data bearing on whether or not incarceration is effective. So the evaluation can give that kind of comparative, this compared to this, and also provide feedback about how certain programs can be refined. Last recommendation is about training and public education, public engagement. Those are obviously all important. You can have great, a sentencing option that becomes available, but if people aren't trained about how to use it effectively, it doesn't meet its goal. I want to end with one other piece of, I think, promising news for this task force. When we put together this grant application, we got impressive support across this county in terms of what people were doing to help plan a better system, were we to have gotten that planning grant. And I included in the packet a letter from the chiefs of police, all the major departments in the county, and they said this: we will conduct a review of our own policies and practices to identify how they can be improved to limit the number of people taken to jail and reduce the racial and socioeconomic disparity in the jail's population. We will explore such matters as the increased use of street issue NTAs, that's notice to appear, station adjustments, diversion. They're talking about steps that could be taken to reduce incarceration, racial disparity in police arrests, and some other matters. We will then take steps, including training, to ensure that changes in policies and procedures are actually implemented at the street level. The MacArthur Foundation, the purpose of those planning grants, they want to reduce not only jail incarceration, they were very focused on the reduction of racial disparity. So we have all the law enforcement officials basically saying we are willing to comprehensively examine what we're doing to see how we can reduce incarceration, including racial disparity. We didn't get that planning grant, so it hasn't happened, but I think that commitment, and I saw how effectively the sheriff and his deputy sheriff, Alan Jones, worked in getting commitments like this, and other people stepped up to the plate. Our community members stepped up as well and were willing to help plan a mentoring program for people coming out of the jail, for example. So I think we've got some solid recommendations that could reduce incarceration in our county, and that would have a huge impact on people of color because there is so much disproportionate representation of people of color in the jail. But we got a long ways to go to implement them.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. But I wanted to just mention the reentry program and then just talk a little bit about the process of that community justice task force. So, I mean, one of the recommendation was the formation of a reentry program. That reentry program has been implemented. It's been funded by the county board, and it's been operating for about 2 years. Part of it has been to set up a reentry council, which involves a combination of law enforcement, judiciary, and service providers. It meets once a month to review the performance of the reentry program. The reentry program has been working with people who are returning from the county jail and from state prison and providing them with some pretty sort of straightforward case management and service referrals. I think it's also important to recognize that not only was the pretrial services not implemented, but the county board actually voted to allocate money to the pretrial services, which then was given back because it wasn't implemented. So I think that's something just to keep in mind in terms of what a setback that was. I want to talk about a couple of sort of contentious issues within the Community Justice Task Force and how we work through them. And I think it's important. I mean, this is the honeymoon period for your task force, but I mean, down the road, there's going to be some differences of opinion, and it's important to find ways to work them out. So, and I mean, to be honest, the most contentious issue on that racial justice task force was the issue of racial disparity, because it wasn't specifically listed in our charge that it was something we're supposed to deal with, and some people felt that it was really outside the charge, and some people felt that it was essential to actually carrying out the charge. And so the way that really got resolved was that a delegation from the African American community, of which Martell Miller was a part, came and motivated very strongly for the inclusion of race in the discussion. So I think that's an example where community participation really made a difference in terms of the direction that we took, and after that we did decide that it was an important issue. So I think that's why it's encouraging that you all are looking at getting that feedback from community, because it can help shape things and get a little bit more resonance with what's actually going on in the community. We had other issues where there was differences that we worked out more easily. We had some differences, for example, in terms of this Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. What should be the balance of participation in that between, say, law enforcement and community members? But I think in the end we kind of rested with the idea that we needed this thing, and that particular detail would be worked out in the implementation of it, should it be implemented. I think in the same way that the details of the Racial Justice Task Force have actually been worked out through practice rather than through making a grand plan. The last thing I wanted to say is that I think for the work of the Community Justice Task Force, I could divide it sort of into two phases, and we did have a change of personnel in the second year. But I think the first phase, we were kind of gathering information and finding ways to work together. But I think in the second phase, we were much tighter, much more focused, and much more directed at decision-making. And I must say, I hope she won't mind me saying this, but Carol Ammons was an iron-fisted chair. She kept us on point, kept us moving toward decisions, kept people talking to the subject and focusing on on the job at hand. So I think it's really important. You can to be a little looser and open at the beginning, but when you get down toward the end of the time and you're actually trying to come to a product, it kind of requires a different style of operation and a little bit more group discipline and agreement not to carry on for too long. So I won't carry on for too long, and I'll stop there. Thanks.
Do we have any questions?
I have two questions. Recommendation number 9, collect data, measure outcomes. Has there been anything put into place to assemble data into a single location or to make it more easy to cross-reference it? For example, in Urbana, if you go to their website, it's very easy to look up bookings, okay? In other words, they have a really nice database. Champaign Police Department does not do that, and the county does not do that. I have no idea about Rantoul, Mohammed, and other areas. But it seems as though the data that's collected is very individual to individual communities. In some cases, it looks like you have to make a request, as Patsy did, and you'll get a smattering of data. Is there, what did you find? Why is there this seeming lack of transparency? Why can't you just Google it and it's there? I guess is what I'm saying. Is there not a commitment on the part of the police departments and the county to make it just straight out available so that once it's taken into the system, it's available to the public?
Would it be possible to have Dottie come up and address that question? That with part of your work has been to monitor the implementation of the recommendations. I saw her raise her hand, so if we could get her feedback.
Okay, and I'm going to be talking a little bit more about this later. There is some information available. The easiest availability is you can look up and see the picture, the photograph and the demographic information on everybody who's in the county jail or on electronic home detention, and what they're charged with, what the bail amount is if they're still pending bail, and if they're serving a sentence in jail, what their release date is going to be. After I tried to get more information easily available, Deputy Sheriff Alan Jones did make some additional reports available on the sheriff's website, which is the total number of people in jail on a given day, how many of them are sentenced, how many are not, and whether they're in the satellite jail, the downtown jail, or on electronic home detention. There's also a listing of everybody who has been brought to the jail to be booked and on a given day, and it lists whether they were released on bail or on recognizance or not. That doesn't, I don't believe, has the charges. And then there's another list of the arraignments. So, but that's just today's information. And so for the past 2 weeks, I've been trying to create a spreadsheet. I missed 2 days, and so there's no way to get that information. And my email correspondence with Alan Jones the past couple of days, he says, no, that's not available yet. That's on the parking lot wish list, and they don't have plans for doing that immediately. But I agree, there's, you can see all the personal information on people who are currently in jail, more than I think should be available. It has their home addresses there and everything. But you can't get systems information, longitudinal information in the aggregate to see what's happening in our jail system. I think a similar situation exists for getting court data, but I haven't even tried to get into that system. So this is one of the areas that I think is still a major concern. It's something that would have been covered at least to some extent, in the grant from the MacArthur Foundation, but we didn't get that. And I don't know to what extent the criminal justice stakeholders here are really committed to that as a high priority. And a lot of it doesn't have the racial, ethnic information in it. So,
And, oh, go ahead. I was going to say.
and I'm happy to save other comments and answers for later and go back to my seat.
And what I would say is, remember the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, and what it brings to the table is system-wide planning, and that would include system-wide data planning, a data structure, so the systems are talking to each other. I also wanted to let you know, there was an announcement literally yesterday, the MacArthur Foundation, one reason we really wanted to get a planning grant is we'd be in the running, then there was going to be, I think, $1 million or something to actually implement, and then it would have helped to begin to implement some of the steps that need to be taken in the county. But the MacArthur Foundation was so impressed with the quality of the submissions, and it has said that it is going to now do something this fall. We don't know what that is, but provide opportunity for funding. Now, again, it'll probably be a competitive grant process. And so I talked to Alan Jones today. I'm not saying we're going to do this, but I do think that that's something for us to be aware of now, because the MacArthur Foundation is going to be looking at, is this a county that's really serious about addressing racial disparity? And part of the response to that answer is going to depend on us and what we're doing with the community. So I want to give you a heads up on that, too.
Yeah, just as a follow-up, thank you. That really did help a lot, and I appreciate the work that's ongoing that you're doing. So what you're saying, though, is that they're putting the information up on a daily basis, and then they're taking it down. Am I correct? And they have the information in a database. They do, because you could request it. So they're letting you take a little snapshot of it on a daily basis, and then they're pulling it back. But they're collecting it in an electronic format, and they're warehousing it and archiving it, and you don't have access to it.
Correct, and that actually is the content of the last email that I sent to Deputy Sheriff Jones.
Okay, was there any response? I mean, I know you just sent it, but.
That was late this afternoon.
Okay, thank you.
To your, a quick question along those same lines. To your knowledge, are they aggregating this data in any way other than it just being in some nebulous database somewhere that they can later pull from?
I don't know.
Okay. Do you know if anybody's tried to seek that information through a Freedom of Information request or anything like that?
Whenever I've made a specific request, he has provided, the answers to it. I've gotten information on, for instance, bookings per month over the past 4 years, and also got information on the notice to appear data from the state's attorney. And so I've been able to collate that information. And those responses have been very quick. And they send a copy to the FOIA person so that they know that this information has been provided. So they have been providing information, but it's not directly available without a specific request.
I just have one more thought. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Could you request the information and then post the information? In other words, could you make it available to the public by requesting it and then just making it public?
Yes, I believe once it's been requested, it can be shared with other members of the public.
So that
But I
could be-
haven't done it.
But that could be done on a monthly basis or something like that?
It probably could be.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Yes.
Actually, I had a question for Lynn. Is that appropriate now, or you just wanted questions for Ms. Vera Weiss?
Oh,
Are you
yeah, that
asking
would
about for
be
the whole
appropriate then.
presentation?
Yeah.
Okay, on the re-entry, actually, maybe this is for James, but, did I understand correctly that you said they gave back the money. Have they disbanded? Is there no one meeting?
No, it wasn't the reentry money that was given back, it was the pretrial money that was given back.
Oh.
The reentry money has been allocated, and it's funding the program that's been run by Community Elements, yeah.
Oh, Community Elements is running the program.
They're running the reentry program, yes.
Okay. So there was nothing, when you were talking about the committee of officials, that was the pretrial, that wasn't the reentry?
No, there's a reentry council.
Council, that's
Which
it,
is
okay.
connected to the reentry program. And the reentry council was formed, as part of the reentry program. That was part of the mandate of the reentry program to form a reentry council. So that's the body that oversees the work of the reentry program.
Okay, and so, and it still exists?
Yeah,
still
it's
in
going, it's
operation?
ongoing. It's been going for,
Okay.
it's been refunded by the county twice.
Yeah, and they're working on reentry for everyone, not just people with mental disabilities?
Right, it's everyone that's coming out of the county jail or even state and federal as well.
Interesting. All right, thank you.
And Susan Silver's also on the reentry council, so she can, I'm sure she has, she's a source of information on this as well. I'm just.
Is there any issue with sort of the restructuring or whatever's going on with community elements? Has that changed anything in ongoing?
Not to my knowledge. I mean, I don't speak for community elements, so I wouldn't want to be quoted on that, but it hasn't come up in the reentry council meeting. I don't know if you have any.
I can just say they've told us so far that they're supporting the continuance of it. They have also said they really don't know what's happening yet, so. Yeah, but they are getting support of the concept and the idea to continue from the parent organization. Yes.
And,
Yeah.
and I mean, they do receive dedicated funding from the county for that program, so, I mean, that would be, if they stop that program, presumably that funding flow would also stop.
It's what used to be called the Champaign County Mental Health Center. And they're basically being absorbed by a larger entity in northern Illinois. There's some restructuring, nobody knows what's going on with that, but that's what happens. Somebody probably knows. Well, I don't think anybody in Champaign County knows, let's put it that way.
Any other comments or questions? Okay. I'd like to thank our presenters. Thank you very much for a very informative presentation. Our next presentation is Build Programs, Not Jails.
Okay, do you want to go ahead and put that up? Well, good evening. I'm sorry to be back. Sorry to be back again so soon. I hope you're not tired of me yet. I'm still James Kilgore, this time wearing the hat of Build Programs, Not Jails. We have a team here. I'm going to provide a little bit of background on the issue of racial disparity in the jail, and then Dottie Vera-Weiss and Alex Pereira will give you the data, and Christina Khan will do sum up and talk about some recommendations for areas of further exploration. So, yeah, if you can do as you did with Lynn and be patient with us, and we'll do the questions and dialogue at the end, I'd appreciate it. So we're not really sure when racial disparity actually began to appear in the jail population, but for us, it came to our attention in 2012 when the proposal came from the sheriff and some county board members and members of the judiciary to fund the building of a new or an extension onto the county jail to the tune of 20 or 30 million. Funding amounts were unsure. Now, a number of us in the community felt very much opposed to the idea of building new jail cells in this county. And one of the reasons that we were opposed to that is that we felt that there was a disproportionate amount of African Americans in that jail. But that we had from anecdotal evidence. We didn't actually ever do a census or a survey. But we took it on ourselves in 2012 to go and describe what Dottie just talked about. Go on the sheriff's website and look at each individual who was booked in the county jail, somewhere between 2 and 250 people, and just make some calculation of the racial breakdown. And what we found, I think, actually surprised even us, because we found that more than 50% of the people in the county jail were black in a county that's 13% black. So, and we've done a number of similar counts since then, and Dottie and Alex will go over some of the data from that, but we've never found that count to fall below 50%. So when we got this count, we began to wonder, is there something particular happening in Champaign County, or is this part of something bigger? So we looked a little bit broader, and we looked at the state of Illinois. And we looked at the state prison population in the state of Illinois, and we found that that was even worse. That in the state of Illinois, the population is 15% black, and the prison population was 58% black. So that disparity in the way we were calculating was 43%. But we also wondered, is this just Illinois? So we began to look at the entire Midwest. And we found that Wisconsin has the highest per capita incarceration rate of African American men, and that Iowa has the highest black to white incarceration rate. And we then calculated that disparity figure between blacks in the general population and blacks in the prison population for all the Midwestern states: Ohio, Iowa, Indiana, Minnesota, Missouri, and Illinois. Michigan doesn't break the statistics down, but what we found was extraordinary, that average racial disparity figure between blacks in the general population and blacks in the prison population far exceeded the similar figures in all the states that we traditionally associate with severe racial discrimination: Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, Florida, Georgia. So, to sum that up, I want to make 2 points. One is, this is a specifically anti-black racism. We find that in Illinois and in our county, that people who are classified as Hispanic are actually underrepresented in the jail and the prison population. In the state, people who are classified as Hispanic make up 12% of the general population, 16% of the general population, 12% of the prison population. Now, I don't mean in any way to diminish some of the racism directed at Latinos or the question of immigration and how that affects incarceration rates in other states. But in this particular situation, we're dealing with something very specific. Secondly, I've looked at every state where I could get data where on that particular statistic, that 43% that Illinois has, and I have not been able to find any state that equals or surpasses Illinois. As far as I can see, Illinois has the highest racial disparity for black people between their presence in the general population and their presence in the prison population. And the icing on the cake is that the figures that Dottie and Alex are going to show you are likely to tell us that Champaign County perhaps has the highest racial disparity of any county in Illinois, and perhaps of any county in the country. And I think that might be a task you might want to explore as part of your investigations. I think it speaks to the importance of the work that you're doing and where you're doing it. So I'm going to now hand over to Dottie and Alex, and they'll give you the details on this from a statistical standpoint. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, James. First, I'd like to point out that in the packets we handed out, if you start at page 12, you'll find something that looks like this. Most of my slides are focusing on separate parts of this page and 1 or 2 pages after that. Get this up here. Okay, so I took a look at that website on September 2nd. that shows everybody who was in the county jail at that time, and it was a very clear disparity between the 13% of the county population that are African American, and of the people actually in the jail, 71% of them were African American. This is a slide that we had planned to give you a copy of, but unfortunately it's not in the packet. If you look at these green bars in the back, these are the people who are in jail, and 145 African American, 51 white, 7 others. So this is at 71% of people in the jail that day that were African American. If you look at these red bars that are in this middle row here, these are the people that are on electronic home detention. The ratios are different. The numbers are 11 African Americans, 14 whites, and this was actually supposed to be 5 others, 4 Latinos and 1 Asian. So a very different kind of profile there. And in some ways, we should be comparing these who are on electronic home detention. Those are people serving a sentence. The people in the jail that are serving sentences are a total of 27 people, 18 African American, and 7 white on that day. So these two are more like comparing apples and apples. Those are 2 different kinds of detention. However, I don't know anything about the charges for which they were convicted that would have some impact on what kind of detention they might do. And I also don't have any information at all on the people who were sent to the Illinois Department of Corrections. This is just the people in our county jail. Okay, so of those 203 people that were in the jail, 27 were serving sentences. The other 176 of them, which was 87% of the people in jail, were either awaiting arraignment, awaiting trial or some other processing of their case, awaiting sentencing, or also some of them were on holds where they were being held to be sent to other counties or other states. And so why were they in jail? You know that sometimes when people are taken to jail, they are released on their own recognizance or on bail. Of the 146 people there, this group down here have the lower amounts of bail that's been required of them. There were 30 of them with bail set less than $10,000. That means to get out of jail, they need to put up 10% of that. And so that would be $1,000. And you know, it's that 10,000 and on down. So if somebody had bail of $1,000, they would have to put up $100. And yet there were people who could not pay it themselves, their families couldn't pay it, they couldn't put it on a credit card, or they didn't feel they could pay the high interest that would be involved in putting it on a credit card. And so this is a range that a total of 42 people, 42% of the people were on the lower bail amounts and 58% on the higher bail amounts. There is a breakdown to some extent of the racial composition in each group on that white paper that follows some of the graphs. There is a slight increase in the number of, the proportion of people at the higher levels that were African American, but it's not a major difference. And again, I don't know what the different charges are that would have an impact on that. So is this, okay, so this is an issue of people who have less money are less likely to get out of jail pending trial or pending processing of their case. And of course, processing of the case is either going to trial or until they make a plea agreement and decide to accept one or more of the charges that have been stated by the state's attorney. And then another way of looking at the people in jail was how long had they been there. If you look at the pie chart over here, the various colors of orange, those are people who had been in jail over 30 days for 1 or 2 or 3 months or more. And the blue section, that's the people who had been in jail less than 30 days. It's roughly 40% less than 30 days, and that's divided further into the group of 1 to 2 days, 3 to 7, and 8 to 30. And this was going to be a really hard slide to explain, except that Lynn already explained a lot of it. This is the issue of pretrial detention and why it matters that if somebody is in jail, if they're a low-risk person, if they stay in jail longer, even more than 24 hours, it increases the risk of them being arrested again before the case is resolved, depending on how long they're in jail. But then they're released at some point before trial. If they're in jail a little bit more, they have a 39% increase in the risk of being arrested again. If they're in jail a longer time, it's 57% increased risk of being arrested again. And in some ways, even more important is that if they are eventually convicted and serve time, the recidivism rate is higher if they have spent more time in jail before trial than if they're released within that 24 hours. So this is clear to me that keeping people in jail longer not only costs more money for the county, for us as taxpayers in the short run, but it also is costing us a lot more in the long run. This is a very busy slide. It is in your packet as a whole page. This shows a number of different opportunities when someone has discretion about what to do with an individual, whether they're going to be arrested, whether they're going to get a citation with a notice to appear. This is probably about page 15 or so in your packet. What charges are going to be filed against them? How many charges? Will they get a pretrial release assessment to figure out, a logical reason for whether they should be kept in jail or released, et cetera. And these are all decision points at which institutional policies that impact poor people more and impact African Americans more come into play. And in addition to the institutional policies where decisions made by the individuals involved may be affected by their unconscious or conscious racism. So these are all things for you to consider maybe as you're moving forward through your evaluation of the whole process. There were supposed to be some more slides, and I feel terrible, but they're in your packet. So the nice colored slides that were Alex's slides are coming up next.
Not on the presentation, I think. Hi, good evening, everybody. So if you follow along with me, there's just 3 pages on your slide, on your packet. The first one looks like this. It's a little line chart. Everybody got that one? All right, I'm just gonna show you guys a couple of ways that we cut the data, a couple ways that we like to look at this data and what messages we get from those. So the first one here really is just a bunch of different snapshots that we've done. So Dottie already told you guys how we can only get 1 day at a time, unless we fire the sheriff, which we've done. So if you just look, the message here really is that ever since we've been following this data, the ratio of African Americans in jail has never really dropped below 50%, which is something that James mentioned. And one way that we like to represent that is to say, if you consider what percentage of black people are in the county versus in the jail, that means that if you're black and you live in Champaign County, you're nearly 14 times more likely to be arrested or to be in jail at any one given day than if you're white. So that really just kind of tells the whole story in one figure, kind of. So the second slide looks like this. That's another way that we like to look at the data. The residential addresses of the people in jail are listed at the sheriff's website every day. So one thing you can do is you can take those addresses and map them out and see where people live, where people are coming from that are in the jail right now. And I mean, you guys could probably tell by the picture that University Ave is a huge divide, and you probably already knew that. But this kind of goes to show too, you can see how concentrated the arrests. So this doesn't map, I want to make clear, this is not showing where the arrests were made. This is where the people in the jail live. And you can see, so the darker purple means higher concentration of African Americans in that neighborhood. And you can clearly see that there's a very strong correlation between higher concentration of African Americans and the people that get arrested. So I mean, one figure you can look at that is that, so out of the residents of Champaign, Urbana only the two cities, they are in jail right now, or in September 2nd. About 50% of them live in neighborhoods that are over 30% African American. Just keep in mind, in a county that has 13% African American population. And these neighborhoods only account for really 17% of the entire population, but 50% of the people in jail come from these neighborhoods. And another thing that I think other people mentioned here today, in the third page, this is kind of the same map, but only looking at traffic-related arrests. So a lot of these are driving with suspended licenses. A lot of them are bundled with other charges as well, but traffic was at least one of them in these cases. And you can see it's pretty much the same story there. I mean, it kind of echoes some of the findings that the IDOT study in Urbana has found regarding, the targeting of African Americans regarding traffic violations. But the one thing about the Urbana study is that it really only focuses on Urbana. We don't have data for the whole county regarding traffic violations, and we don't know how much in fines these people are paying. We don't know, the magnitude of the financial impact on these communities that this targeting of African Americans really has. So I just want to leave you guys with this message. I mean, there's data out there. There's some data that we can't access that we should be able to access. Not all of us could call the sheriff and get data, but FOIA is available. And I just want to urge you guys that, don't let us come here and tell you about the data. Go take a look, and then there's there's people with skills that could help you guys look at the data, but I urge you guys to really find your own findings here. Thanks.
And to follow up on what Alex just said about finding your own data, in the packet, which I apologize is poorly stapled, it's a reflection of my last 2 weeks. Anyway, there is a really helpful sheet, that's the second to last sheet, about how to access data on the sheriff's website, because if you've never done it before, it can kind of be confusing. So we provided that for you. What I'm going to talk about is sort of what our suggestions are as build programs, not jails, and coming from the work and the research and the data and the conversations and the forums and the discussions that we've had for a couple years now. And so that the recommendation list is on the third to last page, and I'm just going to go over that. So the first one has sort of been mentioned, but it's something that we're really interested in, is that we see that there is a benefit of further investigation into the connection of fines and fees to those who are kept in the jails. So I don't know if anybody here has read the Department of Justice report on Ferguson, and that's sort of the idea that we want to investigate and see if that same thing is happening here. So where there's a lack of ability to pay for multiple citations leads to a suspended license, which then can lead to incarceration. So we want to know how to get data on that, and is our county generating large amounts of revenue this way? Sort of a similar framework to the Department of Justice investigation. The second recommendation is that, which is also really important to us and something that we are working on, is, and has been mentioned by a couple people at previous Racial Justice Task Force meetings, which makes us happy, is this idea of the school to prison pipeline. I have done a lot of that local research myself through FOIAs and other sources. Sources are listed here, multiple sources, not just like one day of data, multiple years of data that's been FOIA'd by myself. and taken from a county census and whatever, the sources are on there. There's an overview, there's 2 sections where this educational data can be found here. On the first page, there's a very brief summary, and then right before the recommendation list, there's an overview of racial disparity and discipline in Champaign County schools. And I just want to, this is something that's really important to me personally, but if you look at the data for discipline in Champaign County schools, it's again where we were personally shocked, where we expected to see racial disparity, but we're not prepared to see the crazy amount of racial disparity. It is severe. So for Champaign District 4 schools, between 2012 and 2015, so this is very recent, 75% of all students that were suspended were Black students, 13% were white students. 77.7% of all students expelled were Black students, 13.7 were white students. In 2011, this is the last year that Champaign District 4 will give me data. They will not give me data. They're supposed to collect this data every other year. They have not gotten back to me and several other people, and that's actually one of the charges I hope you guys can deal with, because they are refusing to give out that information. In 2011, 85% of all students who experienced disciplinary action involving police officers were Black students. And Urbana District 116, I also collected data on for several years. And between 2011 and 2015, 65.8% of all the students suspended were Black, 18.6% were white, and 85.7% of all students expelled were Black, and 14.3% were white. I want to also notice that in the school year 2014 to 2015, 100% of the students who were expelled were Black. Every single child that was expelled that year was Black. So this is relevant to what we do, because there is a direct connection between discipline in schools and incarceration as adults, and that this has been proven nationally, globally, but what we recommend for this is that we really want to find a snapshot of what the school to prison pipeline looks like locally for us. How does it play out? And there's, anyone who's studied the school to prison Champaign Public Schools racial disparity data here knows that the county has a history of racial segregation, and now we're seeing this reflected present day in discipline disparities. And like I said, some of this data is difficult to obtain, so we want to be able to get this data, see how pronounced the pipeline is in our county, and make recommendations accordingly. The third recommendation has also been touched on, which is great. We know that a significant number of individuals in the county jails live with mental illness and substance abuse. We want to know where that data is, if it exists at all. We also have always strongly supported that the county prioritize mental health and substance abuse resources, which currently we as a county lack to an embarrassing degree. So even though, we have something like community elements, the last time I check regularly what the waiting list is, if you want to see a psychiatrist at Community Elements and you're on Medicare or Medicaid, it's an 8-month to 9-month waiting period. So anyone who's had any issues with mental illness or knows somebody knows that that is ridiculous. Basically, their referral to me, when I ask them what someone does, basically the recourse is, if it's an emergency, or you have to see somebody but have no access, you just have to go to the ER or jail, which is where a lot of folks end up. Our fourth recommendation is based on our admiration for the Racial Justice Task Force's desire to emphasize going into community and listening to those folks who are affected by racism in the criminal justice system. So we're recommending that the group doesn't really get caught up in like these hot topic debates about policing that are happening, like body cams, not body cams, more Black police, not. So we sort of recommend that you keep emphasizing the community input. We think that's fantastic, and we love that. Number 5, since the task force does want to create racial relationships with affected communities, we just want to emphasize that there should be a tolerance for the way that community members choose to share their lives with you. So it should go without saying that many people affected by systemic racism, poverty, and sexism who have been through the criminal justice system may have many emotions around their experiences. So, but what I see sometimes happening is that there's a tendency to want to police those emotions or deny people their right to be upset or angry. And so as you as a task force go forward into and want to have conversations, that you allow for those emotions to be present. The sixth recommendation we have is that we recommend that that you guys are in touch with what's happening at the county board level, that maybe there's somebody that attends county board meetings, because a lot of the stuff that they talk about and the decisions that they make are going to greatly affect the work that you're doing here. They're talking about November referendums and financial spending, including jail. They're talking about, yeah, I don't need to keep going more into it. But we suggest making sure that the Racial Justice Task Force is well aware of what's going on there, and perhaps even creating relationships with individual board members that might be sympathetic to the work that you're doing, so that you have somebody at that level who can give you a heads up in case there's an issue that's not on the radar. And finally, we just want to keep in mind that our collective goal is to decrease rates of incarceration and to make sure that our county has the resources that everybody needs to live safe and happy lives. So we're really grateful for this opportunity to present this to you today. And we've donated so much time and energy into collecting this data and research. And it's not just the four of us. There's several members of this group that have done a lot of work. And we know that you're donating your time and energy too. And it means a lot to have a group at the county level that not only cares about these issues, but actually wants to implement changes. We were all very excited to be here. And we are really impressed that the Racial Justice Task Force has decided to focus on criminal justice. And we offer our availability to you to help in whatever ways we are capable of. So please never hesitate to reach out to us. And I think that's it, and we'll open the floor to any questions. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Who was our last speaker? I didn't catch your name.
Oh, I'm Christina Khan. Yeah.
When you said, I just had a question on that 100% of the students expelled in Urbana in the 2014-15 year were black. How many students is that?
It's like around 9 or 10. It's not, but it's for Urbana that year. There were, I think, 9. But I have the specifics, but not here. Yeah.
So these other percentages, 65%, 75, we could get how many students that was too?
Well, we can do that. You could do that right now. So up on the top, it says the average number of suspensions for these timeframes. So for Urbana, District 116, from 2000 to 2015, the average number of suspensions is much higher. It's 2,290 suspensions a year, not within those timeframes that's the average per year. And Champaign District 4 is 1,426 suspensions per year. But Champaign District 4, from 2012 to 2015, the suspensions have gone up every single year.
And did Champaign have no expulsions? Is that why there aren't any listed for them?
There's listed 77.7% of all students
okay.
expelled were black, yeah.
I missed that.
Yeah, I have the actual raw numbers, but I don't have them on this, but I can definitely bring that at some point. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I have a couple questions here. And I may know, I got a general idea the answer to this, but I don't have any statistics. What percent of Champaign County, the black population that live in Champaign, Urbana, and Rantoul? What percentage? Do you have any idea? That lives in Champaign, Urbana, and Rantoul? The black? Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. And the other one is very similar to that is what percent of the county jail population come from Champaign, Urbana, and Rantoul?
Yeah, it's the large majority of them.
Overwhelming majority, but.
Yeah, I got probably, just off the top of your head, probably thinking 80, 90%. But I just wondered, did you have the numbers on that? Because, and the only reason I'm going for,
Get those figures.
yeah, because then, I have already mentioned that once we finish here, we're gonna take these to the city, city councils, with some different policy changes maybe. So that's why I wanted that type of information. One last question, and then, I'm curious about, the number of kids being expelled in Champaign-Urbana. How is it different from the kids that live outside Champaign-Urbana? I'm wondering about those numbers. Champaign-Urbana have an average of 10%, but the rural areas have 3%. That's something I would like to see.
So you can actually access that data. So when Obama was elected, he made it a federal, Alex could probably speak about this better than me, because that's his area of expertise. But there's actually, public schools are required by law now to report that data, and there's, what's it called? Civil right, is that what it's called? You know what I'm talking about? There's it's like a government website. Sorry, this is where I got, it's probably sourced on here. I apologize. But you can actually just go to that website and type in any county. And that's where I mentioned Champaign County has failed to report for 2013. And I don't know if they don't have 2015 yet, but that's why I only have 2011 on here for Champaign. They're supposed to report interactions with students with police officers on that web to the federal government. And like I said, there's some legal stuff going on now with the FOIA person with Champaign Public Schools, but let me remember, it's in here. And when I find it, artist, I'll tell you what it is. But you can just go in and type in any county, and all of that will be up there.
Is it also possible to get the number of students at the grade levels in high school who are having disciplinary issues, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior? And I ask that because when I was teaching at Central High School, at first I taught mostly freshmen and sophomores, but then toward the end of my years there, I was teaching seniors. And I kept looking among the seniors that I had for some of the freshmen and sophomores that I had. And many, many, many students were gone. And I went to the counselors and said, wow, our mobility rate, I am not this naive, but our mobility rate must be incredibly high. Where are our students going? Are they moving to Chicago? Are they moving to where? And she said, no, when they hit 16, lots of students drop out. And I know that the school where I was teaching had a 92% graduation rate. And it turned out that only 50% of the students who entered as freshmen stayed to senior year. And the 92% graduation rate was just for those kids who had started the senior year. So we had a graduation rate of under 50% in reality. And I'd like to get some data on the grade level discipline things here. Is that available, or is that?
Yeah, you can FOIA all of that, actually. And Urbana will give you the information immediately. Champaign will fight you on it, which is part of the problem. We think there should be more transparency in getting the data. And to answer your question, Artis, it's the Department of Education Civil Rights Data Collection. If you Google that, there's a federal webpage, and you can look up any county. And hopefully when you look it up, Champaign will have reported their 2013 number. Civil Rights Data Collection, yeah. It's listed in the packet after, on the very first page, there's a short overview of racial disparity, and it's listed as one of our sources. Yeah.
I have a question, too. School districts are also supposed to report to the state, not just to the federal. And so the incidents you're talking about where an officer comes in and arrests, that's supposed to be reported to Springfield as well. Those are annual reports that have to be filed by school districts.
Are you asking me?
No, I'm telling you.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, that's good to know, because I only knew that the federal one was every other year.
Yeah, no, the state may be collecting it on behalf of the federal government and then passing that on.
Yeah.
And they may be, Champaign Unit 4 may be denying that to the state as well, I'm not sure, but it might be a way to access that information.
Well, hopefully you guys, you guys will have better luck than me. I've been trying to get that since last summer from Champaign, District 4, and so has another gentleman.
I just wanted to ask a little bit about, I noticed the bail amounts, over 50% of the bail amounts were set at over $50,000. Did you drill down into that data to find out what percentage was for violent crimes, what percentage was for, I mean, was there a specific reason why so many were that high?
The descriptions of the offenses or of the charges are like Greek to me to a large extent. Some of them, if it says battery, if it says, murder, it's something like that, okay, I know what it is. But because there were so many that I had no idea about, I just totally ignored that. So no, I didn't.
Okay.
And somebody who understands it better could make a whole lot more sense out of it. I mean, there's a lot that I didn't go into detail on that somebody else with more expertise in these areas could learn a lot more from.
And I noticed there was a part where I believe you said that you'd excluded stuff where people were being held on a warrant from another county. Did you investigate the reasons for those warrants at all? I assume the answer is no, but.
No, I didn't.
Okay. And then my last question, did you investigate how many people were being held on civil bonds? Like, for debt collection?
No, I wouldn't know how to recognize that. I mean, there are some where it said city ordinance violation, city OV ordinance violation, but it didn't specify what it was, and no, I have no idea about what you're asking.
And I really do appreciate sort of what you're doing. My assumption is that basically it's just there's not sort of a general easy to access. I mean, is it your recommendation that there be an easy for everybody to access public page or whatever to where you can view all these and drill down through the data?
Personally, I have real mixed feelings about the amount of information that's available there. I know that this is legally supposed to be available information. I come from a medical background, and it blows me away how much is there. But in terms of public policy issues, I know that there's some people who say that they're glad that that much is there so that the families can keep track of their family member that's incarcerated. I think that that's a really important discussion, and I don't have a recommendation on it.
And then, I'm sorry, I keep adding new questions, but basically, I did have, I noticed that one of the things that you guys looked at was the amount of time that people had spent in jail. Was there any breakdown as to how many of those had been convicted versus not?
There were only 27 people who were in jail who were serving sentences.
Okay, so just to...
I have no idea how many of the people that entered jail, what proportion of the people who entered jail are convicted, because I don't have that longitudinal data, and I don't have information on who goes to IDOC.
So you said 27% of the people, 27 people were, had been convicted, but I'm noticing that on the September 2nd, is that the same data?
Yeah.
Okay, because on the September 2nd, 48 people had spent more than 90 days in jail. So,
right, but they weren't serving sentences.
No, well, what I mean is, so at least 21 people had not been convicted, but had been in jail for more than 90 days.
Yes, because most of the people who are serving sentences are serving it for a short time period, for a month or 2 months.
So we're not talking about a significant number of 364-day sentences or that kind of thing?
Correct.
Okay.
And actually, over the past week or so, the range of percent serving sentences has been about 10 to 13%. So that's pretty consistent that it stays that low.
And I guess I'm not sure who this hopefully really final question is for. I'm curious as to whether anybody has any data, whether anecdotally or otherwise, whether how many people are pleading to a crime in order to immediately be released. Is there? I assume that's a lot, but.
I don't have that data. Maybe when you hear from Court Watch in a couple of weeks, you may learn more about that.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Do you?
I mean, I just think you're not going to get data on that because no one's going to say I'm pleading guilty to this crime so I can get out of jail. But so I think the Court Watch will do a good job of that in terms of telling you stories of people that they've had communication.
Maybe you could maybe it could sort of be parsed out as far as like how many people are pleading guilty for time served, that kind of thing, because I think that there's obviously going to be some correlation there, but yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
I have a question that I'm not sure goes to you guys or not, but I'm curious if you're in your experience have determined that there is some specific procedure judges use to determine their financial bonds that they're imposing. Like, is there a written way they decide it's 5,000, 50,000 that anybody knows of?
My understanding is that there is a list of charges and appropriate bail amounts, and that's the starting point, and then they can make an adjustment up or down, and that if the individual has a lawyer, including a public defender, that their lawyer may tell the judge at the arraignment or at the bond hearing, that's not reasonable, my client can't pay that much. I don't know how effective that system is.
Okay, any other questions? Yes?
I had one, and I was waiting because I thought Barbara Kessel was presenting tonight as well, but I see not. Does anyone know the answer to this question? When PNC Petrie was talking about bookings and charges, someone asked over there if those were charges that the arresting officer made or if the attorney made, the state's attorney. Do you know?
I don't know the official answer, but based on the fact that even people who've only been there for a few hours have some kind of a charge listed, I think that whatever the reason that the police officer arrested them is indicated as the initial charge, but then that will get changed when they have the arraignment.
And the arraignment is?
The arraignment occurs either the next day, or if they come in over the weekend, it will occur on Monday. They do have bond hearings over the weekend so that some people are able to get out on bail and then come back Monday to the arraignment after they've been out. Others stay in jail over the weekend for the arraignment.
So the people who are waiting a long time in jail have already been arraigned?
Yes.
And the charges that they're going to go to court on have already been leveled against them, or are more brought in by the attorneys?
I'm not the person to answer that. I think that they sometimes add some, they sometimes remove some.
So the arresting officer is not the one who determines what the charges are?
Not the formal official charges. They have the reason for arrest. And it's kind of listed in the same place as the charges are.
And do the charges that they're eventually arraigned on, are those charges logical extensions of the arresting officer's
I can't answer that.
notes? Okay, so I'll have to wait till Barbara or Court Watch comes back.
Right, or you may also be able to get information from the public defenders or private attorneys perhaps, or state's attorney's office. I mean, I think that you're in a position to ask anybody to come and give you information.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Well, thank you very much for the presentation. All right, as we are wrapping up, we have task force member comments as the next agenda item. Is there any last comments that would like to be made?
I just make one. Martell Miller mentioned something about the driving license. I sent out an email. I hope everyone received that email with the I guess, the information about driving license disparity. I hope everyone take a look at that so that when we decide to talk about that in the future, we have some ideas. Thank you.
I had a comment. We were talking about eliciting personal stories from people. And I've been thinking about that a lot since our last meeting. I think that personal stories are very important for a number of reasons. And two of those reasons are that it gives people a chance to be heard, and it gives people a chance to say, this is what it felt when such and such happened to me. And from that, we can begin to pin the anguish of things when they happen in the social justice arena to what we're doing to our citizens, to our fellow people. But a second thing that I think this task force has to grapple with and not lose sight of, and I could be wrong, is that the personal stories give us a chance to begin to find out which questions we should be asking. Because personal stories and anecdotes don't provide data, but to me they provide a vital starting point to ask the questions we need to find data. And from those stories, we can ask the right questions to find trends and solutions. So I think we just have to keep that in mind, that when we're hearing the stories, we're hearing the raw, underneath the data, information that will let us do a better job of finding out what it is we're actually looking for. It's not just the stories.
All right, thank you.
Quick comment.
Go ahead.
I'll bring this up next week. I just want to throw this out there. An idea I had was us deciding some way to show our support for the city of Urbana in the recent movement on marijuana possession fines. I think that's an important step forward. That is my humble opinion, but I wanted to discuss that as a group and see if we have any options for acknowledging our support and why we think that's important, and how it relates to our work. So I may come up with some more specific ideas and present those to you next week when we have more time.
All right. All right, well, thank you. Oh, go ahead.
One last thing, I'd just like to take a minute and hope that we all just keep Kim Bryan in our thoughts, knowing what happened. So that's all.
What happened?
Yeah. Okay, if that is all.
I move to adjourn. Second.
All right. Have a fantastic evening, and thank you for joining us.